All right, hey guys, it's Joe and Savannah with the Relationship Society, and welcome to week 2 of the Get It Together program. And I know this is probably pretty challenging for some of us doing the at-home study. Um, and we've had couples that the ones that really stick with it really get a lot out of this. And remember, this is about your transformation and growth, and we're here to really support you and as you move through this process of really connecting and spending that time with the material that we're creating for you. Um, so, but this week we're going to be talking about conflict and its resolution. We all have conflict, right? We all go through that. We all have the brain damage that comes from going through conflict, right? And we cause brain damage to one another, and we get stuck in these cycles. As Gottman talks about, the criticism, and then there's a withdrawing or a distancing, and a contempt, where there's an ante up to that, and stonewalling. And so these are some of just the patterns that we get stuck in that make it really hard to resolve conflicts. And then, of course, we have all our feelings and all that stuff. So one of the things that I advise couples to do when they are going into a conflict is to really begin to learn to contain or quarantine the conflicts into different things. Like, for instance, one of the things that I advise couples to do is when they're about to go into conflict or they're heading into a conflict is to take a time out and to take the whatever's going on in that relationship or in that dialogue is to put it into a parking lot. And there's all sorts of different ways that you can do this. First is to, again, what we talked about before, is to stop, think, observe, and process before you really get into a negative situation. But part of quarantining that is, being able to both take that and put it into a parking lot so that you can schedule the conflict to be talked about at another time through another meeting of sorts. And you schedule that meeting for another, say, 4 o'clock on Sunday, so that you're able to really discuss some of the more negative, more tense things. So one of the things that I have couples do is, if you have a phone and you have a note section in here, is whatever the negative situation is you take the idea here is put it into the note section of your phone, whatever the negative issue is. And that way you have a way of containing some of the negativity or those issues, quarantining the content there. So, but also so you're not forgetting, you can go back and talk about it later. And part of that too is then you can kind of bleed out all the frustration and hurt and anger and really create a safe haven, a safe place for you both to have that conversation and dialogue at an appropriate time. So, because at that time, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in your brain. You have your amygdala is getting hijacked when you're having a conflict, and you got that whole fight and flight and all these different responses. So it takes about, anytime you're in a conflict, it takes about 50 to 90 minutes for all the adrenaline and cortisol and the other parts of that are all ramped up inside of you to kind of bleed out of your system to actually be able to have a conversation. So that's one of the things that we talked about in another segment on creating a safe haven relationship. But this is one way that you can really make sure that you're setting up an environment that you're not going to disqualify each other from being heard. And so that's going to be the first step, is this the right time to be having that conversation? The other thing is too, if you're kind of more of the withdrawer, the distancer in the relationship, you want to make sure that you're also leaning into that negative and setting up times that are going to be, that you can both make that time available to begin resolving the conflict. So if you're avoiding, don't do that. Doesn't help. So make sure you're scheduling a time that works. But a good first step is getting that into your parking lot. And one of the things they have other couples do is they have at home, they have like a white, if you can't do it on the phone, You can put it on a whiteboard in the home, and you have the parking lot issues that are coming up for the week. And the other thing I do with is, say you're going on a date, okay? Because this is where it's so funny, because we get in conflict as we're driving on a date and we're out to have fun. So I say, listen, guys, keep the fun guy and that time playful, fun, and don't allow negative things to be happening, and don't be trying to resolve conflict when you're out trying to have fun. Bring your fun guy to the party. Keep the fun guy there. And part of, again, having that parking lot is a way of containing some of those negative things and resolving conflict. Okay, so what do we do when we actually get to resolving that conflict? So on the Prepare and Enrich in our Get It Together program, on page 9, it talks about resolving conflict and what are some of the steps, the 10 steps to resolving conflict. Because all couples, we all have differences and disagreements, and studies show that the amount of disagreements are related to marital happiness as much as how they are handled. So what that really means is, hey, you're going to have conflict. Conflict's a normal part of your relationship, but the important thing about your conflict is really learning to stay connected through that conflict. All right? So happy couples do not avoid disagreements. They resolve them while remaining respectful of each other, and thereby you're really strengthening your relationship. And so this 10-step model that we're going to be teaching you and that you're going to be going through is it is simple, but it's an effective way to resolve any and all the conflicts while avoiding the common and destructive patterns that can evolve around stonewalling or criticism. So use this model with an ongoing issue in your relationship, as well as any future issues that may be coming up for you. So the first thing that Savannah and I always recommend is that you pick a place, a time where you can both sit down and have that conversation. Remember the first week when we talked about being able to be active listeners and to also be assertive. And this is where you can really begin to also apply that skill of the slices skill of suspending judgment, really listening, understanding, and validating, really care, compassion, showing interest, being curious, empathy, encouragement, tell me more, and then to be able to switch. So to constantly be reminding ourselves and being mindful of what it means, that what we're trying to do here. So the analogy I used last time a little bit with resolving conflict, remember we talked about the eye lily pads? Well, you coming at it from because remember, you're coming at this conflict with your own fears and wants and needs and desires, and your partner's coming at it from their eye lily pad. So the goal here is we're going to be moving off our eye lily pads onto a we lily pad. And that's where we are building into this program here a way to make that a win-win situation for both of you, where it's not a win-lose or I'm right, you're wrong, and avoiding responsibility, and the cost of that is a loss of connection and love and affinity and freedom and power. We want to be able to bring that power and authenticity and freedom so that you can really have a connecting relationship. So let's take a look at the first things here that we want to do with resolving conflict and conflict resolution. So the first thing, like we talked about, is really setting up a time and a place for that discussion. Sometimes it's good to get out of the normal domain of the house. So if you're normally having conflict in the house, get out. Go have some fun. Go to a restaurant. Go somewhere public. Go have some coffee. Don't do it necessarily in the house where you're already heated up and there's all sorts of stuff going on. Get out of that domain. Find somewhere. Get somewhere else where it's not re-triggering you in some way. So set a time and a place to have that discussion. Again, try not to have that discussion over when you're trying to have a date, a fun time. Keep the fun time fun. This is really about you talking through and resolving some more challenging things. So number 2 is really defining the problem, the specific problem. Be specific. And that step, this is going to be really critical and important because you may both be looking at the problem completely different. So when you write out what the problem is and you both look at the problem, you go, oh my gosh, we're not even talking about the same thing. You're not even on the same page on what the problem is. So really sitting down and writing out what the problem is will help you guys both see where some of that disjunction is between your theory and application and what you're both trying to work towards. And that's to get to an agreement. Or maybe not an agreement. You just want to have a conversation or try to talk or try to connect about something. The third thing is really begin listing the ways that you each are contributing to the problem. Okay? And, partner one, partner two. Because here's the thing. Keep in mind, there are no bad guys here. All right? Okay? Now, but some of us, we have this binocular effect when we're looking at conflict resolution. This binocular effect is one of you is kind of making it bigger than it is and catastrophizing it, making it worse than it is, and all this catastrophe and making it uglier. And the other person is looking through that binocular and making it less than it is or smaller than it is, and diminishing it or minimizing it and making it smaller. So the goal here is to really look at reality as what is, not make it better or worse or bigger or smaller, but to really look at how both of you are contributing to that problem. And that's a really good place to start, is to take ownership of your contribution to that. The next thing, step 4, is really list the past attempts of how you guys try to resolve the issues that were not successful. That's a really good way. Maybe, what are some of the ways that were maybe unsuccessful for you? Maybe one of you is labeling or criticizing or withdrawing or distancing or avoiding responsibility for what they need, or not really leaning into the negative, or maybe it got to be too crazy and you needed to take a time out and you didn't do that. So maybe just list down 4 ways that you've made these past attempts to resolve the issue, but it didn't work. For some reason it went sideways. Well, that's okay. We know it's not working. So let's find some new ways that are going to make it work. So this way you can break that pattern. So the next part, number 5, is really begin to brainstorm. This is where you get to pool your ideas and try to list 10 possible solutions to the problem. Don't judge or criticize any of the suggestions at this point. But typically in a conflict, what you're going to see is one person or both of you are making the other person both the problem and the solution to the problem. So that doesn't work. So you want to get away from that blaming and you're the problem and the point, and you're the one responsible for the solution to the problem, or you're the problem for pointing out the problem, and so you're spinning tables and you're counterattacking. Those don't work. But this way, you want to be able to be brainstorming and looking at new options. Because a lot of times you come at it with one option, and the other person comes at it with another option, and you kind of are just dismissing, and a negative plus a negative is a negative. It's going to just, or is that a positive? I don't know. It's whatever happens, but it's creating some problems. So we want to really encourage you to come up with 10 solutions that are going to really work, and make them crazy, make them outrageous, make them, find ways to begin to look at the problem in a different light. But make sure you're raising that water up, because a lot of times if we're going to move from a gridlock into a dialogue, we got to raise that water a little bit. I like the metaphor of kind of moving through the Panama Canal. You gotta, the boats are kind of like dispersing and getting rid of all the crap that's in the boat and leaving it out there for the sharks to gobble up, and then they move it into chambers and they raise the water, and then they move it in, and then they raise the water and move it in. And so you're actually raising that water, and you're moving from a gridlock from one side to the other, from alienation, disconnection, from this conflict back through this disconnection to the conflict back to intimacy and connection. So there's some movement there for you guys. And the cool thing about when you have all these new ideas, you got all these 10 ideas, and they're crazy, the cool thing about that is you can start ruling out the ones that you both agree on that aren't going to work. So that's kind of a neat idea, because then you're already beginning to agree on something that's just not going to work for both of you. So now you're able to gain some agreement and some win-win around some of those things. So the next thing is 6 is discuss and really begin to evaluate each of these possible solutions. And be as objective as possible. Try to talk about how useful and appropriate each suggestion feels for resolving your issue. So what that means is, as you're going through it, evaluate it, but again, using the slices and the communication tools that we taught you last week to really be able to listen and understand and validate the other person. It doesn't mean agreement. We're not there yet. We're not even in a state of agreement. We're just trying to connect to a solution. Number 7 is agree on one solution you're going to try. Find out what's going to work. Maybe you try one for 1 week and then go another couple weeks and then try the other person's solution. But try to toggle that back and forth where you're both being able to get on your wee lily pad and create something that gets you some traction. Don't feel like you have to resolve that conflict right now. That might be something you just have to stay on that parking lot for a couple weeks, but you're not avoiding it. You're keeping it in that parking lot until you can keep coming back to it and try to resolve that conflict. Okay. Agree on how each of you are going to work towards a solution. How are you going, and be as specific as possible. What are you going to do to work on that solution, and then come back and set up another meeting to discuss your progress. And make sure you're setting up a place, make sure there's a date, make sure there's a time. It's just like anything. If you don't schedule it, it's not real. So when you schedule it, it becomes real and it becomes tangible. And make sure, and that's something that you could put into your marriage fire document when you go to hopefully you've set up your marriage fire. Now you have some ways of following through and following up with maybe a wish or a conflict or something that you're going through. So we've given you this marriage fire system so that you can actually get some great work around this. The other thing is reward each other for your progress. This is great because if you notice your partner making a positive contribution toward the solution, hey, bring some praise, praise and admiration for the effort. Find ways of really contributing that way. Hey, I really noticed, even if it's small, hey, I really noticed that you took the effort to show up and, you're on time, or, you called me 15 minutes before you were going to be late to let me know you were going to be late, so I didn't have to wait for 15 minutes after I was expecting you for dinner. Really be specific about the praise and what you really appreciate. So anyways, these are just a few steps for you to be thinking about on conflict and conflict resolution. The other thing, please go back over the conflict resolution in page 10 and 11 in the workbook so that you have these tools to kind of review. So thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in week 3. And as you do the work, and Savannah and I are here to support you and watch through these videos. And thanks a lot. Let's get it together.